Cliffhangers have been used in multiple sources of media, including film, TV, and literature. If you don't know already, a cliffhanger is where we end a scene, chapter, episode, film, or book with a suspense or moment that is designed to leave the audience wanting more. Imagine, as the name suggests, a character hanging from the edge of a cliff by one hand, then the scene ending there. Did they fall? Did they pull themselves up? We need to continue investing into the story to find out. This technique is usually used to create tension and anticipation, forcing the audience to wait until the next installment or section to find out what happens next. The obvious intention of this is that it makes your reader continue to the next chapter, your moviegoer come back for the sequel, or your TV show watcher to binge an entire season. Cliffhangers have been around for a very long time, but today let's look at how you can use them effectively when writing your own story, how you can avoid potential contrivances, and help you spot cliffhangers in media that you support. When placing cliffhangers into your story, the most important part is that the situation needs to have a certain level of ambiguity to it. If the outcome is obvious to the reader, or the perilous side isn't likely, then the cliffhanger won't be effective. Fake-out deaths are classic examples of how this can go wrong. This is especially prominent in TV and films where time is limited, so deaths are a quick way to get emotional payoff from the audience. The issue here is that writers may want to have their cake and eat it. They want the emotional effect without losing a character. These are bad cliffhangers, because more often than not the feint is obvious to the audience. In the Lord of the Rings films, we are teased that Aragorn might have died, but I have never met anybody over 12 who thought that this was an actual possibility or something that actually happened. The outcome wasn't ambiguous. Instead, this felt like a form of emotional manipulation to make us invest more in the story, and it showed. In The Italian Job, however, the good original one that is, the entire film ends with the bus literally hanging over the cliff, with our characters and the gold trapped perilously inside. This is a tantalizing example of an expert cliffhanger, where the outcome is far from obvious given everything we've seen in the film. Despite no payoff, this scene solidified the film as a classic, with debates about what happened next until the writers revealed it later. This again speaks to the ambiguity necessary to create convincing cliffhangers. In The Italian Job, we don't know what will happen next, and we have no good indication that will tell us. In The Lord of the Rings, however, we are all fairly certain that Aragorn hasn't died, considering he's going to be the main focus of the rest of the film and the third. Another important step to any effective and satisfying cliffhanger is to build anticipation before the moment. You want to steadily invest your audience in the proceedings, hinting at or stating the outcomes that could come to pass if something should happen. More than that, cliffhangers have to serve the plot. They are not for emotional manipulation. They should contribute to the narrative and then provide a natural climax of events, then cut to black. All that build-up and anticipation is what makes a cliffhanger so effective. You're denying the audience the satisfaction right at the moment they expect it. The film The Thing has a great cliffhanger ending with the dog running across the ice. We've spent an entire movie building up the stakes of what will happen if the dog escapes, so the cut to black after the gunshot without knowing what happens is the perfect amount of payoff. Similarly, as seen most in TV shows and books, you can use the knowable length of the medium to build anticipation, only to give some payoff at the end. When you're watching a TV show, you know how much longer is left, how many more episodes there are to go. Each minute we watch in the final or penultimate episode builds the tension of what can be squeezed into the time and what will be left mysterious for now. In Season 1 of Game of Thrones, Ned Stark is dead, and we are waiting for the North's reaction. The entire last episode builds and builds until Robb is finally declared King of the North at the end. This is enough information to hook us and make us invest in the second season, but not so much information that we're not interested in finding out more. We want our audiences to have questions, and some information. We don't want to tell them everything, as there'll be no intrigue, and we want to avoid telling them nothing, otherwise it's too abrupt and forced and there's no reason for them to come back. When it comes to cliffhangers, we also want to make sure we don't use too many. This is the same for almost any writing technique, but let's just focus on cliffhangers. Overuse creates emotional fatigue in our audience, and essentially makes them stop caring about what's happening. It cheapens them, and can shatter the immersion for the audience. On top of that, you need to make sure any payoff you give is satisfying. Do this by being strict about the logical consistencies in your story, as well as making sure you're not being contrived in how you do things. Planning can be really useful here, to make sure you keep track of all the details that allow a payoff to make sense. Darth Vader's reveal as Luke's father is a great cliffhanger for the next Star Wars film. We are given the entire next film to build up for the payoff after the cliffhanger, which leads to it being immensely satisfying. You need to let your cliffhanger breathe after you've done it, and then build up the audience investment to pay it off. You can't rush these things. Leave space for resolutions to ferment naturally. Chewbacca's fake-out death in The Rise of Skywalker is revealed to be fake within a few minutes of the cliffhanger being done. This doesn't give us time to come to terms with the consequences of what's just happened, or what the consequences might be in the future. It feels cheap and manipulative. There is a balancing act here, though. The more investment, the stronger the payoff needs to be. And you do need to pay off cliffhangers that take place in the middle of your story. Cliffhangers to finish are fine. It creates a talking point. But baiting your audience in the middle and then giving nothing, just like with mystery boxes, will leave them deeply dissatisfied. I mentioned it earlier, but a final point that is worth exploring is making sure cliffhangers feed into your story. You don't want to be creating cliffhangers at the detriment of character development or cohesive narratives. Don't prioritize shock value over character growth. For example, if a character's story arc is cut off abruptly in a cliffhanger, without any resolution or further development, it can feel unsatisfying and undermine the audience investment in that character and the rest of the story. The best cliffhangers support characters and provide some shock. Make the cliffhanger related to the character's development and arc. In Breaking Bad, Jesse is kidnapped by a rival drug gang, and his fate is left uncertain. But it also helps us understand his character more, as he's forced to confront the consequences of his actions and grows as a consequence. More than that, cliffhangers are great for raising stakes rather than stopping stories abruptly. In Gone Girl, the narrative shift between the characters allows for tension to build as Nick discovers more clues that may help his case. Not everything is told to us, but we can feel the stakes rise with each cliffhanger. So, cliffhangers can be a very effective tool in your writing arsenal, but just make sure you're using them wisely, despite how tempting it can be to try and get some quick shock value. Remember that the best cliffhangers aren't the ones that shock us. They're the ones that drive the story and the characters forward, and thus invest us emotionally in the narrative.